Hey friends, welcome back to the No Wrong Turns podcast with Audrey Lakeman Hunter. I'm Audrey and I'm your host. I'm so happy that you're here. If you like what you're listening to today, make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Every other Tuesday, we have an awesome guest come on and chat about their story and their passions, and how their passions have evolved and grown throughout their story. Subscribe today to the No Wrong Turns pod with Audrey Lakeman Hunter on your podcast player app so that you guys will never miss an episode. Hey friends, happy Tuesday. How are you all doing? This summer is flying by for me. My husband and I have been deep into working on our Spanish visas and finalizing our move for Spain. We are excited to finally get there and start experiencing Spanish life and winding down this last month here stateside, as they say, just getting all the final preparations ready to go. Friends, if you are interested in being in a small group setting for listening, discussion, and action work with the main focus being on racial justice, I would invite you to consider joining my book club. Our summer book selection is Biased, Uncovering the Hidden Prejudice That Shapes What We See, Think, and Do by Jennifer L. Eberhardt. If you're interested in joining a conversation, our next book club meeting will be on Tuesday, August 3rd at 7:30 p.m. Chicago time. DM us on our social medias at No Wrong Turns Pod or email us at nowrongturnspod@gmail.com. And you can see the show notes for the link for the book. Listeners, welcome to our 44th episode with my friend Amanda Tregellas. Amanda is a proud Wisconsinite and proud dog mom to her little dog Gus. We met through a summer missions trip when we went to Brazil and the Bahamas several years ago together. During this episode, Amanda will walk us through her story and how some of her passions have stayed the same and some have shifted. You're for sure going to want to lean in and not miss hearing Amanda's story as she highlights her passions of teaching and sharing Jesus on the daily. No matter if this is your story and you can relate to her or not, I believe that there is something in this episode for you. All right, here's my conversation with Amanda Tregellas. Welcome back to the No Wrong Turns pod. Today on the pod, we have Amanda Tregellas. Hey, Amanda.
Hey, Audrey.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Just chilling.
Awesome. Do you have anybody near you?
I have my little mini golden doodle, Gusher Raymond, Gus for short. But yes, he's laying next to me.
He is a cutie. I just wanted to give Gus a shout out.
Oh, yeah.
Amanda, besides having a dog, can you give the listeners like a 30, 60 second, like kind of 30,000 foot view of like who you are, where you are, what you do, some fun facts? Well, you don't have to tell us where you are if you don't want.
I'm currently sitting on my couch.
Okay.
But I am 28 years young. I live in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, a suburb of Milwaukee. And I kind of grew up in Oak Creek, even though this is my first year officially living in Oak Creek. I am a daughter to two of the best parents in the world.
Aww.
I have a twin sister who's married. I have an older brother who's married, and they have given me four beautiful nieces. So my favorite title is auntie at the moment. My other favorite title is fiance. Shout out to Tim. We'll be getting married next June, which is really exciting. Not super stressful since we have so long to plan, so it's good. I work in Oak Creek as well. I am a 6th through 8th grade English language arts teacher at a personalized learning academy within the school district, which is a new position for me this year, but I've really loved it. And it's just been a great learning opportunity. And a fun fact, kind of a weird fact. Well, it's not weird, but a little bit. My fiance and I met on Bumble, which is not the weird part. But in talking on our first date, we found out that both sets of our parents were both married, then divorced, and remarried to each other.
That is a pretty, like, the odds, like, that's pretty crazy.
Isn't it weird? So
Yeah.
I told him like that pattern ends there. Like we're not going to be the next ones to do that. We're just going to be married. So, but yeah, that's a little about me.
Awesome. Well, I support that. So, Amanda and I are friends outside of the podcast interview in real life.
Yes.
So, that's how I knew the intel on her dog and such. So you mentioned that you kind of grew up near Oak Creek, where you are
Mhm.
now. Can you kind of give us a little like view into your childhood? What was it like for you, like growing up, and any hobbies or special interests or passions that you had?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Milwaukee. We lived in Milwaukee from when I was born till about seventh grade. And that was honestly my favorite part of growing up. We lived in a duplex, so it was my family, and then my nan and papa, or my grandma and grandpa, lived upstairs from us, which now looking back, that they're both not here with us anymore, I think is just something that I'm really thankful for. That as a kid, I think I'm just, I think that everyone grew up with their grandparents, but now I know how special that was. So I'm really thankful for that. And my aunt and uncle and their family actually lived around the corner as well. So family has always just been really close and still is. So I'm really thankful for that upbringing, especially in a God-fearing family. I think that that's been something that wasn't like forced on us. It was just something that was what we did. It was never, you need to do this, you need to do that. It was just, hey, God loves you, and um, kind of gave it to us as our own thing to, make choices on, especially as we got older. But my parents were absolutely incredible and are still incredible. They're not anymore. Sorry, mom and dad. I still feel like sometimes, like, they just raised us so well, especially having two teenage daughters, like the exact same age, going through all those things at the same time. But um, one thing that I'm especially thankful for, especially now as an educator and as someone who has seen the lack of diversity, like in the suburbs and things where I live.
Hmm.
When I was growing up, we went to a public school in Milwaukee, and I had friends from all different backgrounds. I had teachers of all different backgrounds. I was exposed to so many different cultures. And at the time as a kid, obviously, I wasn't, it's not that I wasn't appreciative of it. I just didn't know that other people didn't have that exposure.
Right.
Um, and it wasn't until middle school when we moved to the suburbs that it was kind of like turned into, wait, where did the diversity go, and where did um, all of that kind of happen? So I'm really thankful for my parents for kind of giving, I think sometimes Milwaukee gets a bad rap for being a very segregated city, which it is. But there's really good parts of it too. But also as a kid, I think what shaped me the most to be an educator is I love talking. And I was always the kid at parent teacher conferences that was told was too social. Um, the teachers loved me, so I don't like the term, but I'm sure they would call me the teacher's pet. Um, uh, like now being a teacher, I don't like that term, but I'm sure that that's who I was when I was little. But my teachers in elementary school are the ones who made me want to become a teacher.
That's
I
awesome.
still keep in contact with them now, which is like crazy to think about just because it's been so long.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm just so grateful for their guidance in um, challenging me as a student, because I mean, school kind of did come easy, but I was always challenged or always had something to do, which was nice. And the teachers like invested in us outside of school as well. So like they would come I played a lot of sports in elementary school, like volleyball and basketball and softball, so they would like come to our sport games and things like
Well,
that.
that's awesome.
So like seeing those things, I feel like you don't see as often anymore. So I'm very grateful for those teachers who invested in me because I knew that I would want to do that for someone one day.
That's awesome. So when you were in high school,
Mhm.
what were some of the things that like were catching your attention? Was it the same kind of like sports outlets you had when you were younger, or were you in different like hobbies and clubs?
So in high school, I was in Oak Creek. I had moved out of Milwaukee, and it's a lot more competitive in the sports. Not saying that I wasn't good enough, but I was not good enough. I remember I went to like the first 2 days of volleyball tryouts for high school, and like I could not walk the next day. So I was like, I don't think this is gonna be good for me. Um,
Especially if that's just the tryout.
it was insane, absolutely insane. But I was okay with that. Like, I mean, I loved sports. I still love like watching sports and playing them like for fun, but
Hmm.
I was okay with it not being my life, where I felt like in high school, like it had to be your life or you weren't going to be successful in it.
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of opted more for the socialize with as many people as you can. I was like actually thinking about high school. I was talking about it with my eighth graders the other day because they're like, "What was high school like?" And I was like, "I don't know." Like that just seems so long ago. But I do remember that I had like a lot of different groups of friends.
Hmm.
Not that I was like I wasn't different in any of those groups. I was still like who I am,
Hmm.
but I had my two best friends who are still two of my best friends. Shelby and Kelly Mars from eighth grade. So I had met them. We were all new in eighth grade to our schools. So it was kind of like we bound together and didn't separate at all.
Hmm.
Um, so I had like a group of people who kind of just we just hung out with each other.
Hmm.
But then I still had like my volleyball friends from middle school that I played with, so I would still hang out with them. I had some friends from church who, I mean, Shelby was included in that as well, but
Hmm.
I had some friends from church that I would talk to, or whatever it was, or just I feel like we all have those people like you're just friends with them in your class. Like if you don't
Right.
have any of your, like if you don't have any of your other friends, you have your in-class friends. So I feel like I
Yeah,
had those too,
the ones you like partner up with, you're like, oh yeah, we'll help
Yes.
each other out. We'll
Or
wait in the
like
hall.
you got my notes, I got your notes. You're gonna be sick tomorrow. I got you. Whatever it is.
Totally.
Um, so I feel like high school wasn't very monumental
Hmm.
in like any hobbies or anything like that. It did show me that I did not want to be a high school teacher.
Okay,
Um,
that's important. Narrow that down.
yes, because all through schooling, I knew I want to be a teacher. That's it. There was literally nothing else on my radar. I never had anything else on my radar.
Hmm.
Um, and going through middle school and high school, I was like, I cannot be a middle school or high school teacher. Now I'm a middle school teacher, but um, I just feel like through high school is more of just finding who I am and then just sticking to it because I feel like in high school, a lot of the struggle comes from trying to figure out who you are and trying to figure out where you fit in.
Hmm.
And thankfully and luckily, I've never really had a problem with confidence. So it was not very, I mean, luckily, I don't feel like high school is very challenging for me, but um, yeah, it was just a good like social experience, I feel like.
Awesome. So, in your senior year, what were you thinking for your next steps? Did you know that you for sure wanted to go to college, or were you thinking about taking a year off? Did you
Yeah.
even have any idea? You mentioned knowing that you wanted to be a teacher coming from your elementary school
hmm
teachers. But did you know that for sure? Or were you kind of contemplating between a couple different things?
Yeah, so I never wavered from being a teacher. I guess I knew that I didn't love any subject enough to teach that all day.
Gotcha.
So I feel like that kind of narrowed it down to being an elementary teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't even looking at like big colleges. Both of my parents didn't attend university. So the only exposure that I had to that was my older brother.
Mm.
And he loved college. So I was like, I think, well, obviously I need to go to a 4-year school to be a teacher. I knew that.
Right.
Um, but at the time, I was big on saving money. And I say at the time because now I just love to spend it. Uh, but I was like, I've heard of like some people going to a tech school and getting like
Mm-hmm.
their core credits done, and then going to a 4-year from there when they need to. So that was my
Mm-hmm.
plan the whole time. I was going to go to METC, which is Milwaukee Area Technical College, just to get my core credits, save some money, live at
Mm-hmm.
home. I was working at TJ Maxx at the time, a
Is that when you became a
Maxxinista.
Maxinista?
Oh, yes, a Maxxinista fashionista. So I wasn't really making that much money because I was
Because you're
spending it,
spending
but
it all.
I was like, I can work, still live at home, save some money. So that was my plan the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But then my sister was touring University of Wisconsin Whitewater, and she was going for education as well, which is another fun fact. Both of my siblings are teachers as well.
Mm.
Um, actually, which is kind of weird because really no one else in our family is education, but all three of us are. And she was going to tour UW Whitewater, which is like in the middle of nowhere. And that wasn't even like the biggest problem for me. It was just that it smelled.
Like what?
It smelled like farm. Like it just smelled like on your way out there, all you see is farm. It's about like, I would say 45, 50 minutes northeast of Milwaukee.
Okay.
And there's really not that much around it. So I didn't really understand why people would want to go here. But we
Mm-hmm.
got there and I saw the campus and it was like just absolutely gorgeous.
Mm.
It was like small enough but big enough. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like you'd get lost, but you still feel like you're at college.
Yeah.
So after the tour, my sister's like, "Oh, I can't wait to apply." And then, you know what? I think I'm gonna apply too. So I did, and then I got in, and my sister didn't.
Akko Taco.
Very Akko Jacko. So that's how I ended up at UW Whitewater. So it was never really planned, but it just kind of all fell into place.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So once you started, was it just like a major in education then?
Yeah. So my major it's technically MCEA, which is middle childhood, early adolescence.
Okay.
So my licensure is teaching grades 1 through 8.
Okay.
And then I have 2 minors. Well, one of them, it was just Spanish at first,
Mm-hmm.
because I had so many credits from high school that I just had to take 2 classes, and then I had my minor. And then later on in my college career, I ended up adding English as a second language as well,
Mm-hmm.
because it was something that was very prevalent. And it was a new program to UW Whitewater, like it was just a couple years old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I ended up adding that at like towards the end of my career.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So during your college years, was there anything that kind of like marked you or like kind of like affirmed your passion
hmm
for education or like developed any new passions?
So I think going to Whitewater really put into my lap the fact that my faith was my own, which doesn't seem like it connects to education in any way.
Mm-hmm.
But being away from my family and being away from like my home church, which is the Salvation Army, there's not that many Salvation Armies very close to Whitewater.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to take it into my own hands to figure out, where am I going to get spiritually fed? Where am I going to continue to grow in my faith? And like, what is next for me? And I think going to college changed that for me because I was just very much in a routine
Mm-hmm.
of like Wednesdays we'll go to church and do some activities, sing or whatever. Sunday we'll go to church, listen to the sermon, all that kind of stuff. And it was, and read your Bible daily, do Bible study.
Today's episode sponsor is from Molly Wilkinson's new book, French Pastry Made Simple: Foolproof Recipes for Éclairs, Tarts, and Macarons, and more. Unleash your inner pastry chef with Molly Wilkinson's approachable recipes for all of your French favorites. Trained at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, Molly takes most of the essential techniques and makes them easy for home bakers, resulting in a collection of simple, key recipes that open the world of pastry. With friendly, detailed directions with brilliant shortcuts that you can skip the whole pastry shop and enjoy a delicious homemade creation. Master-based recipes like 30-minute puff pastry, decadent chocolate ganache, and fail-safe citrus curds. And you're on your way to making dozens of iconic French treats. You'll feel like a pro when whipping up some gorgeous trays of madeleines and decorating a stunning array of cream puffs and eclairs, along with the classics like the Frenchman's chocolate mousse and profiteroles. Learn to assemble an exquisite showstoppers such as caramel mousse tartlets and poached pears in ginger. This go-to guide shows you all the tips and tricks you need to impress your guests and have fun with French pastry. You can find her new book link in the show notes. Today's episode is brought to you by Omio. Omio is a travel booking platform that makes planning a journey in Europe and North America effortless. Just enter your travel details and Omio will magically give you all of the train, bus, flight, and ferry options for your journey. It's never been simpler to book your first real vacation in 2021. Best of all, using Omio saves you time and money. That's a win-win in our books. Omio wants to help you leave your house this summer by offering up a 5% off discount for your next booking. Just head to omio.com and use the code OMIO5, the number, at checkout. Valid until July 31st for New Year's users on all modes of transportation. It's an easy pick-me-up that 2021 really needs. Omio. Plan, book, and love the journey. Terms and conditions apply. You can see the show notes for the Omio link. All right, back to Amanda's story.
So I think one of the biggest things that happened for me in college was making my faith my own. Because now that I was on my own, it wasn't my parents' choice to have me go to church with them, on Wednesdays, going to sing in the choir, and then Sundays going to hear the sermons and doing Bible studies or devotions each day. There wasn't anyone there to hold me accountable anymore. It was all up to me.
Yeah.
So at that point, it kind of forced me in a good way to get involved in different things on campus. So I joined InterVarsity, which was a faith group on campus with other college students, and joined like a women's Bible study, which was great. And found a church in Whitewater as well, but I still didn't feel completely whole in a way. There still felt like there was something missing that I felt like God was trying to like push me in a new direction that I didn't really know what was going on. So during my freshman year of college, I was told by a friend in the Salvation Army about a program in the summer called Summer Mission Teams, which I know that Chris Shea was on your podcast.
Yeah, she was episode 2.
Yes. Shout out to Crochet. Love her. Great woman. Such an amazing mentor. And I was approached by um, my pastor at the time who said, like this could be a great opportunity for you. They send people on mission trips around the world, sometimes just in the US as well. It's for young adults. Maybe you should just apply for it. And at this time, I hadn't really left the Midwest except to go to Florida, like for spring break.
Yeah, that's just like lower Midwest.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty much all the Midwesterners, like on spring break, we all just travel together to Florida. Exactly. And then we all come back together. So me thinking about traveling the world, like, made me so excited in a way that I just hadn't thought about it before. My family, like I said, our biggest adventure was like Florida. And that was just kind of how my parents were as well. Not that they wouldn't want to travel the world, but it just wasn't something that as a family of 5 we were really doing on a regular basis or ever. So they convinced me, my pastors at the time convinced me to apply. And my sister also applied, and I got accepted and was told that I was going to India. And I mean, as an 18-year-old and the first time leaving the country, going on like a 24-hour flight was insane, but it was absolutely incredible. And I think just pushing myself out of my comfort zone and finding like that inner voice of what God is pushing me to do instead of like my plan for myself was something that summer really solidified. Because I was a planner. Like I had planned to go to MATC and then go on to a 4-year college, but once I was introduced to whitewater, that didn't work out either. But now looking back, I know it all worked exactly how it was supposed to. But through those years at whitewater, education was still always a big passion of mine. So then spending the summers going on mission trips was kind of where those two passions collided. Because not only was I able to go and tell people about God or to see other people from the Salvation Army around the world, I was also able to teach, whether it was in a Sunday school or just at schools in other countries, or even the people on a team, teaching them how to communicate or what not to do or what to do and things like that. It was always a learning process that I wasn't expecting, but then by the end of it, I was very thankful for, which I know we can, really celebrate our time together because that's how we met.
Yes.
So I'm really thankful for those summers that I had. So I went to India in 2011.
Wow, that was 10 years ago.
Isn't that crazy? Oh my goodness. I feel old. I feel old because now this is a little like, it's not off topic, but now I teach 7th grade geography as well as my English language arts classes. And we're currently learning about like India and Asian countries and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I went to India a couple of years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was 10 years ago.
Like these guys were just toddlers.
Like not, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And I'm like, wow, that's insane. So like when I think back to like 18-year-old me going to India, I'm just like, holy cow. Like I wonder what like 28-year-old me would be like in India, So it's just really weird to think about. But after that, I did take a year off because my dad had gotten sick. He had stage 4 cancer, which was very a trying time, especially as a college student, not being at home. I think having this like mountaintop, like very like high experience of going to India for, I think it was like 7 weeks or so, and getting to experience this beautiful culture with all these different people, and coming back and like going back to school within just a couple weeks. um I almost felt like I wasn't doing enough anymore, because you go from doing stuff like every day to help other people, and then when I came back, I felt like I just wasn't doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say like 3 months after I got back from India, about 3 months, is when we found out that my dad had stage 4 cancer. So then it was just kind of like blow after blow, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, was like, why is this happening?
Right.
And like, I just had this amazing experience. I had never felt closer to God. I had never felt more like I was fulfilling a purpose or pursuing a passion. And then now it's like crashing down really hard. And I remember having conversations with my dad as he's like going through like chemo and like all these treatments and all this stuff. And I just always remember him saying, we never know what God's plan is. We just have to be obedient and ready for it. So like being able to be open to being ready for whatever is next was
Mm-hmm.
something that I really struggled with. I found out.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think like everyone struggles with that. A
Yeah.
lot of us like to be in control and plan our lives as much as we can. Um, but then having to give that all up or seeing that we're not in control is just something that people struggle with. So I think especially um, as my dad was going through treatments and things like that, the opportunity to apply for summer missions team came up again, but it
Mm-hmm.
was in 2013, so I took off like 2 years, because I just kind of felt, like even though my dad's going through these things, I know he's like okay for right now.
Yeah.
And he would always tell me like, you're not a doctor, so like you can't help me. So you might as well go do God's work. And like he
Um.
always just had like, you're not like, what are you gonna do? He was like, not that I don't want you here, but like, what are you
Right.
gonna do here?
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to Suriname in 2013, which is in South America.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know where it was until I was told that I was going
Do
there.
a quick Google.
Yeah. Oh, okay, there it is. Which Suriname was a rough summer. Shout out to Team Suriname if you're listening to
If you
this.
know, you know.
If you know, you know. It was a rough summer. But looking back on it, it taught so many things. And it's just one of
Mm-hmm.
those things where it's like, how am I gonna get out of this? When is this gonna end? But again, it was just like another learning experience. And after that summer, I was still like in my teaching classes. I was like fully in my education program at that point. So it was pretty rigorous. It was a lot of tests to get into the College of Education, and then tests to get certified, and studying for tests. And I honestly just felt like when I came back from the mission trips, I just like put those behind me and then went into school mode.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I didn't learn until later on was like my missions can't stop when I come back home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I think like one thing that is a struggle sometimes is, I feel really comfortable talking to anybody, and I feel really comfortable going into situations that I'm like not used to. But when I come back home, I just like go right back into my routine.
Right.
So like feeling that I'm not fulfilling a purpose, or like my mission work is just overseas, was
Mm-hmm.
like a really bad like thought process. So actually after Suriname, I kind of had like an epiphany, like that aha moment
Right.
of like, I can still do things here. Like, I
Mhm.
don't need to be like out in a third world country or out in a foreign country or even a different state or a different county. Sometimes it feels
Yeah.
like I can do it wherever I'm at.
Mhm.
Um, so then that's actually when I added the ESL component to my degree, because I wanted to work in an urban area.
Mhm.
And I also wanted to be able to like help those who were learning English as a second language.
Mhm.
Because one, I already think they're better than me no matter who they are because they know at least one more language than I do.
Right.
Um, and I just felt like a calling to do that, to be in these urban schools, and then also to work with those who have already, they might have things stacked against them. So I
Mhm.
didn't want English to be another barrier.
Right.
So that's kind of how the missions and the education collided, to become something that I wanted to pursue even more.
That's awesome. So at that time when you like around 2013, I guess is
Mhm.
where we are. Had you graduated from college yet, or where were you on that front?
Not yet. So I was, let's see, a junior in college. I
Okay.
graduated in 2015.
Gotcha.
And I had a super senior year, because I had added the ESL component. So I had to do like another semester of student teaching on
Gotcha.
top of student teaching. So it kind of extended a little bit, but it was worth it. Um, so then in 2014, we got to go to Brazil, Bahamas.
Shout
Woohoo!
out
That's
to the
where we met, I feel
Bahamas.
like. So, which was another great experience. So, still being able to be a part of the missions programs in the summer,
Mhm.
was kind of a great way to still have that big program as a part of my life, but then also have the day to day missions of
Mhm.
I felt like my education classes were preparing me for what I felt like was like my life mission, which
Mhm.
was educating students,
Mhm.
which is like a work in itself. Um, Anyone who has any idea of like who teachers are, what they do, um, if you know anyone who's a teacher, you know that it's not just teaching them in the text what's in the textbook.
Yeah.
So like you have, well, I feel like to be a good teacher, you have to have a passion for it. And
Mhm.
I feel like it has to be your mission to want to better people's lives. Which going on mission trips, not only am I feeling like I'm going to help other people, but I always came out a better person from them, which I think I loved the most, which people don't expect. I feel like a lot of people sometimes go in with the mentality of, I'm here to serve them, I'm going to make their life better,
Mhm.
which 99.9% of the time, they're a lot happier than I am, and then I get a lot out
Yeah.
of it, you know. So, um, so then I had a year left, lots of tests to take. So in Wisconsin, you have to do 3 tests. They're called the Praxis tests,
Mhm.
to get certified. I actually had to do another one to get certified to teach ESL.
Mhm.
And then you have to take a reading test. And now, thank God this happened after I was a teacher. Now you have to do like a whole digital recording of your teachings. You have to like annotate like a narrative about lessons you taught. It's insane. So I didn't have to do that part, thankfully.
Wow.
Um, but it's a lot of work. So I finally graduated in May of 2015 with my degree.
Awesome. So after you graduated, did you know what you were going to do for your next step? did you have a job lined up, or were you thinking of taking some time off just to kind of
Mhm.
um, focus on being an adult or trying out another job? What were you thinking?
So honestly, I was not, I feel like I wasn't really prepared for adulthood. Um, I remember like my first resume and now I like cringe thinking about it.
Ah,
But I didn't really have a lot like set up. But at the time, my brother was working at a private Catholic school in Milwaukee, but it was a choice school. So a lot of the low income students got to go there for free and get a private school education.
okay.
So there was a couple times during college that I went and like observed him. He's a PE teacher, but he would like pair me up with like a third grade teacher or a fifth grade teacher and
Mm-hmm.
let me kind of observe for the day just to see kind of how their school went. And one thing that I absolutely loved was the fact that not only were they teaching like the academic part of it,
Mm-hmm.
but they got to talk about God. And I never really like had thought about that before of something that I wanted, but then once I kind of got a taste of it, that's where I wanted to go. So when I graduated, I applied to a couple different choice schools in Milwaukee, but all of them were either Catholic, which I'm not Catholic, but I was still able to kind of like teach about God and also use, like Jesus is watching you as a behavior management skill. So having those kinds of things was kind of important to me. So I ended up interviewing at a couple schools and I started my career as a third grade teacher in Milwaukee at a choice school. And I was like, "Oh, I found it. I found my place. This is what I want."
Mm,
I never really thought that I would leave,
yeah,
but I also didn't think that I would ever want to do anything else, like I said before.
right.
Um, but things change. Things change.
That if there's one thing in life that's for sure is change happens,
Yes.
whether you're ready for it or not.
Yeah. So I taught third grade for 2 years there. And after my first year there, I was actually asked to lead a team to Kenya in that summer. So I ended up doing that, and it was a pretty good experience. Um, I had a lot of, I felt like I had a lot of growing up to do
Mm-hmm.
because I felt like I'm in charge of these people now,
Right.
and I have to tell like these young adults like what's expected of them. I have to keep them in line where like I used to be the person that I could just do what I wanted because I wasn't the team leader.
And they're also
Um,
a little bit older than third graders.
yes. So going from third graders and seeing different like behaviors and things, it's like, okay, you're third graders. But then having like a range of, I want to say it was like 18 to 22-year-olds maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, having to almost like mother them
Yeah.
was something where I was like, I don't think this is for me anymore.
Right.
I loved going to Kenya. I loved doing the missions part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but not I feel like this is going to sound bad, but I don't mean it in a bad way at all. But going with a group of random people that I did not choose,
Mm-hmm.
and people that I don't know where they're at spiritually, I don't know like, what level of independence they have. Um, it just felt tiring to me at that point. So I was like, I don't know if this summer missions team thing is for me anymore.
Right.
Which was kind of heartbreaking for me just because I loved it so much. Um,
Hey listeners, some of you may have heard a big part of my story on how I started this podcast. During my day job, I get to listen to podcasts all day long. The ones I really enjoy are the ones that encompass someone's story and their passions. Since I'm an avid podcast listener, I wanted to start sharing some podcasts and podcast episodes that I've really enjoyed because I think you will as well. This week, I wanted to highlight both a podcast I enjoy and a book of liturgies that's new to me that I'm enjoying as well. This comes in the form of Annie F. Downs' podcast called That Sounds Fun in episode 289 with Douglas McClevey, the author of Every Moment Holy. In this episode, Annie and Douglas have an honest conversation about the power of written down prayers and the need for a prayer in grief and how to create something that will outlast you. This is a beautiful conversation that I think you will love. You can see the link in the show notes. All right, back to Amanda's story.
but I remember like coming back that summer, I was like, I don't know about this anymore. So I really thought about, what does missions look like for me? Because I don't think it looks like SMT anymore. And that's where I really like focused on what I was doing in my day-to-day with education. Especially working in a private Christian school, I could still talk about God. And I realized I was focusing on the students the most, which obviously as a teacher, that's my priority. But I was missing out on all the adult interaction that I wasn't being intentional about. Like being able to talk to coworkers about life in general. I think sometimes we just get so used to being in a routine of, okay, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to do my work, then I'm going to go home from work, and not thinking about being intentional about time, even if it's just passing in the hall or in the break room, whatever it was. So I ended up looking at that point more at how can I make my daily work like my new mission.
Right.
Instead of like always having to have this big idea of what my mission would look like. Like I just wanted to make it more intentional and more of a day-to-day thing. So yeah, that was my first couple of years of teaching. But now I'm in my 6th year.
Yeah.
And it's been a whirlwind, Audrey. It's been crazy. I think I guess I shouldn't speak for everybody, but I went into my first job saying, this is where I want to be forever. I love these people. I love these kids. I love this grade level. I stayed there for 2 years, and then there was a lot of kind of like turmoil within like the administration and a lot of teachers leaving and things like that. And I'm like, this feels like a sinking ship. I'm gonna leave now. So I ended up getting a new job teaching 5th grade at a school that was crazy. And I don't say that lightly. I think you remember the time that I was at this school, and it was just a couple months. Like honestly, I feel like it took years off of my life, but I literally worked at this school for a couple months, and it was urban, which is what I wanted. It was a Christian school, which is what I wanted. It was with 5th graders, which was kind of like my golden age. I really loved like the 3rd grade through 5th grade age range. So I'm like, this is going to be perfect. And it was awful. Absolutely awful. And at that point was the only time where I was like, is this what my life is going to be like? Like, is this this is what I've had in my head of what I've wanted, and now it's here and I hate it. I hate every second of it. And I was like really worried, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I even in the right field? Like, if I was really doing this for the kids, I should be able to show up and do my job every day. But I couldn't. So I ended up leaving, which I still can't believe I quit without having another job. Because at this point I had my own apartment and I was like, I got bills to pay, but I wasn't even thinking
Yeah.
about that.
Adult life. Those bills don't stop.
They don't. Bills, bills, bills. So I was like, I can't be here. Like, I knew for my mental health, and I knew that if I ever wanted to be an educator again or stay an educator, I had to leave.
Mm.
Um, so it just so happened that at my brother's school, they were losing an art teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I am not an art teacher.
You're not?
I I'm not, believe it or not. I am artsy, but I'm not an art teacher. But they had an opening and it was a K4 through second grade building. That's it.
Okay.
And I had never worked with any children. I mean, I'd worked with children in my life, but I had never taught any grade lower than third grade at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I was terrified. First of all, teaching art. Second of all, to 4-year-olds, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And it ended up being the best job. Honestly, still probably my favorite position that I've had.
Wow.
Yeah. And I love my job now, but like it was a this is gonna sound so materialistic. It was a beautiful room with a beautiful view of like downtown Milwaukee. It had like a little lofted area. My brother was the gym teacher, so like he was literally next door.
Mm-hmm.
And him and I got to do like interventions together. So like we would pull small groups, we would have lunch together every day. Um, he would take naps up in my loft area
That's
sometimes.
hilarious.
So like it was just such a great place. And um shout out to the St. Anthony Familia because they got me through like the toughest times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to like create positions. The principal who was there at the time, I'm gonna name her Brandy Hart because
Shout out to
she's
you.
Brandy Hart. What a MVP because um when I was going through a tough time in my life and I had like quit St. Anthony's, she created a job for me to come back to. And she's
Wow.
like, like, we're here. We love you. Whenever you're ready to start working again, like, I will make a job for you.
Wow.
So like being a part of a community like that, um, I felt like I had like felt fulfilled in a mission
Mm-hmm.
and like being able to find somewhere where I felt so comfortable, where I felt like I was doing something that I was like called to do. Later on, I got to become the music teacher for part of the time as well. But then I spent my last year there as a kindergarten teacher
Mm-hmm.
and just being able to be with these people for almost 3.5 years was something that God knew I needed because I would not have made it through those years without them.
Mm.
I'm getting emotional, which is weird,
That's
but
okay.
but I think just being able to be comfortable and be like almost like safe
Mm-hmm.
at this place where like God had called me to, nothing that I planned for again. Um but I was like fulfilling a mission and he put me where I needed to be. So it was something that I'm still so thankful for. And just it sounds weird, but I miss it a lot,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know why. Well, I do know why I left, but I ended up leaving this year because I felt like I was becoming too comfortable.
Right.
Um, where like I wasn't feeling challenged as an educator anymore.
Hmm.
And I also felt like sometimes, I don't know if you ever feel this way, but sometimes I feel like a big like push from God or like a big pull from God, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was like get out, you're too comfortable.
Hmm.
Which was weird because I loved my St. Anthony's family.
You did not want to
Um,
get out.
I didn't. And I didn't even start looking for a job because I was like, I don't want to leave. I'm not leaving. Um, but then at the end of the summer of 2020, oof, what a rough year. Being a teacher during COVID, being anything during COVID is hard. Like anyone during COVID is like, you're living, you're great, it's hard. But being a virtual kindergarten teacher during COVID was, I think, one of the hardest things I had to do, but one of the like funniest things I think I've ever experienced. Um, but at the end of summer of 2020, I was approached actually by my sister-in-law who works in the Oak Creek Franklin School District about a position that was opening up at a personalized learning academy. And it was for an English language arts teacher, and it was for middle school. And I hadn't taught middle school. Well, middle school in Wisconsin is 6th through 8th grade. I know it's like different sometimes in districts and things like that.
Yeah.
But I hadn't done middle school since my student teaching. So, one, I was slightly intimidated.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I didn't know if I knew language arts enough to be able to teach it.
Yeah,
Because I'm
that's for
just
sure.
like,
Grammar?
yes, I'm just like, do I know the rules of like commas or semicolons or whatever? And then I'm like thinking, what's the difference between APA format and MLA format? And
They
like,
get
are
into
these
that
things?
in middle school?
They don't, but these were the things that were like running through my head. And I'm like, I don't think I'm qualified. But I ended up interviewing, and I didn't tell anyone at St. Anthony's because I still think I was in denial. Like, I'm not gonna leave you guys. Like, don't worry, I'm not gonna leave. I'm just
Yeah.
entertaining this idea. But then I remember like talking with my family about it, and well, my boyfriend at the time. He's now my fiance, but I just
Mm-hmm.
remember like talking about like, I ended up getting offered the job, and I honestly took a couple days to say like, I really have to think about this because I love my job. Um, and I didn't want to be one of those people who like tries to find like where the grass is greener and then it
Right.
ends up being not greener.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't want to be one of those people. So I took a while to think about it, but then I ended up thinking about it in a way of, this is just kind of like a new mission
Mm.
of, comfortable in your private school because you can openly talk about your faith, and you
Right.
can talk to your kids about God, and you can talk to your coworkers about God, and you can kind of, comfort in ways that is different because it's a private school. So moving into public schools, um, that's not as accepted. So I saw it as like a new way for me to be challenged, not only as a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
because now I'm teaching 3 grade levels instead of just like 1 grade level.
Right.
So challenged as a teacher, but then also in my faith and in this mission, because I can't just openly talk to my kids about God, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't just openly talk to my coworkers about it. Um, like, I literally have to show with my life
Mm-hmm.
who God is and like why I'm different as a Christian, or like not even just as a Christian, but just as like a good human being. Like, what are my actions and words telling other people? So like having that as like kind of a motivator, as like, okay, here's your new challenge,
Right.
was actually the reason why I moved into the public setting. Um, I mean, the pay was a lot better too, so that helped. But like I mean, looking into the future of like a family eventually, and like later on, obviously retirement,
In a
everything
couple
just
of
in
years.
a couple of years, Um, everything just kind of like started making sense as like this is a career move instead of just a job move.
Right.
Where like now I'm uncomfortable in a good way where like I'm being challenged. I feel like I could stay where I'm at for life, like for my career. But I
But you
also
thought that
feel
about your first job too.
I did. You're right. So check in a couple years and we'll see where we're at.
Will do.
But it's just been kind of one of those things where I think this whole like 2020, 2021 year is weird. And it's been like a little off-putting and almost like unsteady. But like this new thing in my life, which is huge, um, has felt like comforting, even though it's uncomfortable. So it's really weird. Um, it's been a weird kind of like challenge and process. But I do feel, even though I said it my first year of teaching, um, I feel like I'm where I'm going to be for my career. I don't, even though missions is something that I love and
Mm-hmm.
support and will always support and will always tell people to pursue, like overseas missions and things like that. Um, I don't think that it's like a career move for me anymore. I don't think that I think I was trying to make it a career move because I liked the feeling of how I felt overseas and how I
Right.
felt in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think I was humbled by the fact that, like, God just saying, you don't have to have these big moments. Like, you can literally do it in your day to day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like, having those two things collide in the best way possible has been the thing that has just, like, made me who I am. And I'm really grateful for it.
That's awesome. So you found in your like passion, pursuing your passion of teaching, you found that you're also pursuing your passion of missions and telling people about Jesus, whether
Yeah.
that's through your words or your actions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's been something that has been it was hard to swallow, I think, like the first, I don't know, couple months of realizing, like maybe you're not meant to be overseas all the time. And maybe you should just be doing it in your day to day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now I'm really grateful for it because I think that it has not only helped me as an educator, but it has helped with like all the different relationships I've had with students or coworkers or friends or strangers or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really helped with that.
All right, I'm going to pivot and ask you about if somebody's listening to this and they have heard you chat about your passions for teaching and for missions, for telling people about Jesus. What, and they're thinking, they're kind of like resonating with your story and they're interested in learning more about either of those two and what it would look like for them to pursue that in their life. What would you suggest to them for either resources or maybe for next steps?
I think for education, the biggest thing that I can say is to just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I think that especially in college, before getting into like the college of education where like the classes are more um, structured to what you're actually going to experience as a teacher, I
Mm-hmm.
think it just feels very long sometimes and it feels
Yeah.
a little bit like, oh my gosh, am I actually going to have to do all this every day? No, you won't have to do 20-page lesson plans like they make you do in college. I literally write down maybe 10 words per lesson plan now. So that's obviously not the biggest thing, but I think when thinking about is teaching the profession that you want to do, um, think about it not only as being a teacher, but some days you're going to have to be like the mom. Some days you're going to have to be the hairstylist. I did a lot of people's hair. Sometimes you're going to have to be the comforter. Sometimes you're going to have to be, like the therapist, the social worker, whatever it is. Um, I think going into education, being ready to wear different hats is something that sometimes you're not prepared for. And then like, especially in the first couple of years can be very tiring. But I think especially if we're starting to pursue education, I mean, outside of COVID times, I would say go visit schools, and see if you can like, volunteer in a classroom or, I mean, now you could pop into Zoom calls and see how those are going, in virtual learning, but just kind of like dipping your toes into an actual school setting, because I know a lot of people who would like go into the education field and say, "Oh, well, I'm really good at like with kids,"
Right.
when they like worked at a summer camp or they babysat like twice a month for 2 hours or whatever it is. And
Right.
it's like, okay, but can you handle 30 kids at a time with like 20 different needs and still teach what you need to teach? So just trying to prepare yourself for being ready for what's going to be thrown at you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us each week to listen to our awesome guests as they come on and chat about their story and their passions and how their passions have evolved and grown throughout their story. I am so humbled and honored that you would choose to download and listen to these conversations every other week through inviting me into your earbuds, your car, your Alexas, your Google Homes, wherever you listen. Thank you so much. I am so grateful for you. Could you do me a favor? If you have not already, could you please subscribe to the podcast, whichever podcast player app that you're listening to us on today? If you're subscribed, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. It makes a huge difference. I also would love it if you would share this episode with a friend. I find about so many different shows through recommendations from friends. Maybe some of you have found out about this show through a friend sharing it with you. Lastly, would you please leave a rating or review on whichever podcast player app you're listening to us on? Thank you so much. I know these things may seem really small, like subscribing, sharing the show, leaving a rating or review, but they make a huge difference to new listeners finding the No Wrong Turns pod. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for cheering on the No Wrong Turns pod. Thank you for subscribing, sharing, and reviewing the show. All right, back to Amanda's story. All right, we have one final question for you. And that is a question we ask all of our podcast guests, and that is, what is fueling you today? What is fueling your passion? This could be anything from a new TV show that you found on Netflix or something, or a new coffee order, or I don't know, something you found at Hobby Lobby, because I know you frequent there. So what is fueling you today? What is fueling your passion?
I think I have two, if that's allowed. So the first one would be my hand lettering kind of like side biz. So being able to find an outlet to kind of like unwind, but also to be able to like integrate that into my teaching has been a lot of fun. And then the second one I think would be finding fun, corny, cheesy series like on Netflix. So
Totally.
I am obsessed with The Circle, so the social media game.
Okay.
It's very, you'll just get sucked in and watch all the episodes right away. But then also Beauty and the Baker. It'll make you
Ooh,
cringe,
that is,
but
I
it'll
I
make,
have watched this one as
yes.
I'm halfway through, so don't spoil anything. But it definitely at moments are totally cringe, but then other moments I'm literally laughing out loud. Did you find the
Yes.
same?
Yes. It is so, it's so bad, but so good. Like it's so bad that it's good. So I definitely, I think having those outlets to be able to unwind, but also like keep things kind of light,
Right.
have been kind of my saving grace, especially this past year of like virtual and hybrid and asynchronous and synchronous learning.
Mm-hmm.
Just all these words I never want to hear again. So it's been, those are definitely fueling me at this point.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and about your passions.
Yes.
And just just sharing with us.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad it finally worked out. to finally talk about things. So it's been really good. So thank you.
Awesome. Friends, that was an awesome conversation with Amanda. One area that I really liked was how she explained how her passion for missions changed and morphed into a passion for simply sharing Jesus in her everyday life. Amanda did a great job at explaining how her passion for missions, she was actually able to kind of dig in and identify specifically what she loves so much about that passion and then transfer it into her everyday life. I hope you were all encouraged today from Amanda's story and her passions. My prayer is that you would consider what God has for you and what He might be leading you to. Alright, you can see the show notes for our music credits. During this episode, Amanda mentioned a few guests that we previously had on the No Wrong Turns pod. She mentioned Chris Shea from episode 2 and Shelby Thompson from episode 10. Those episodes are linked in the show notes as well. Alright guys, enjoy your week. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. And I will see you back here next time with Katie Casada, a storytelling coach. Hey friends, you have just listened to the No Wrong Turns pod with Audrey Hickman Hunter. I'm Audrey and I'm your host, and I'm so happy that you're here. If you like what you're listening to today, make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are bringing you new shows every other Tuesday, and we have an awesome guest to come and chat about their story and their passions, and how their passions have evolved and grown throughout their story. Subscribe today to the No Wrong Turns pod with Audrey Hickman Hunter on your podcast player app so you will never miss an episode. All right, bye guys. See you next time.